For a lot of human history, brains were not thought to be particularly important. Instead, focus was given over to other parts of the body. This seems a reasonable enough early conclusion. After all, a change in your heartbeat and butterflies in your stomach can indicate excitement, and goosebumps on your skin may indicate fear. We use expressions such as "what does your heart tell you" and "trust your gut" when talking about important decisions. When a brain is exposed, it has no sensations of touch or pain, and in its natural state it is not very solid. These are some of the reasons why it was thought to be unimportant by many. However, some people disagreed and conducted research on the brain, making some groundbreaking discoveries as they progressed. Modern medical technology has also made studying the brain easier through magnetic resonance imaging. We now know that everything we experience, even the emotions mapped through our bodies, comes from the brain. It truly is one of the most miraculous structures in the known universe. So with that in mind, here are 10 things you should know about the brain. 1. Your neurons are with you from birth. Not many things stay with you for your whole life. If you look at a picture of yourself as a baby, almost everything in that picture has gone due to the continuous cycle of death and reproduction of cells within your body. You might even hear people claim this means that you have a new body every decade. This is not quite true though, as there are two types of cells that don't go through this process. One of these is the cells in the lenses of your eyes, and the other is the nerve cells or neurons in your brain. A human brain has around 86 billion neurons, and almost all of these are with you from birth. Take another look at that picture of yourself as a baby. You are looking at someone with the same neurons but a completely different body. Although your neurons remain the same, you obviously don't still have the mind of a baby. This is because the unique shapes of neurons allows them to create incredibly complex networks to connect and communicate with each other. When you learn something new, these networks change in different ways, such as forming new connections, strengthening existing pathways, or adjusting the speed that information is sent through the networks. In fact, by the time you get to the end of this section of the video, your neural networks will likely be different from when you started. The brain is responsible for everything you do and storing everything you learn. However, it is also responsible for making you, you. Everything you experience, dream about, remember, look forward to. It is essential for your neurons to exist throughout your life to have a continuous sense of being you. 2. Not all life needs a brain. Plants and single-celled organisms like amoeba don't have brains, but they can sense and react to their environment. Amoeba can also smell and hunt bacteria by sensing chemical trails, and can also avoid predators. However, as life becomes multicellular and gets bigger, more coordination and complex behaviours are required, leading to the requirement for nervous systems and brains. Let's take a quick look at the evolution of the brain. Around 3.8 billion years ago, the first life appeared on Earth. These were single-celled organisms, but since all life emerged from this starting point, these single-celled organisms already held the key in their DNA for unlocking the development of brains. According to evidence in the fossil record, multicellular life first appeared around 900 million years ago, with organisms like sponges, which don't have a nervous system but can react to their environment. The first organisms with nervous systems likely did not have brains, such as comb jellies, which appeared around 730 million years ago, and jellyfish, which appeared around 680 million years ago. Around 540 million years ago, there was a Cambrian explosion, when a variety of life forms exploded into existence in the seas. Among these was a creature called Pikaia gracilens, a 1.5 inch long creature with a flat body and tail fin that swam like an eel, and this is where evidence of the earliest form of brain is found. There is still more evidence to be discovered in this area, however this could be the starting point for the amazing world of brains. 3. Your brain is like a chemistry lab. A signal which is sent along a single neuron is electrical. However, when neurons communicate with each other, they do so using chemicals known as neurotransmitters. There are over 40 neurotransmitters that exist within the human central nervous system, and they all have a different role or function. In fact, quite often a single neurotransmitter will have multiple functions. Let's find out about some of the main neurotransmitters and what they do. Glutamate is responsible for what could be described as an excited state in the brain, making neurons fire more. High levels of glutamate can cause the death of neurons and has been linked as a possible factor in Alzheimer's disease. Dopamine is involved in the processes of carrying out voluntary movements and also in how we experience reward. It has also been linked to attention, learning and working memory. Serotonin plays a role in a wide variety of situations, including our moods, our experience of reward, anger and rage, our eating behaviours and our memories. Noradrenaline is linked to our fight or flight response when faced with a threat or danger, having physical effects on the body such as pupil dilation and increased heart rate. In the brain, noradrenaline is linked to being alert, attention, motivation and learning and memory. Histamine is involved in making us feel awake, how we experience hunger and eating, and our motivation to do things. This is why when you take antihistamines you may feel drowsy, because you are inhibiting the histamine's effect of making us feel awake. Endorphins are considered the body's own painkiller, and they're involved in neural activity and cell growth. Endorphin uptake is linked to exercise, singing, eating, dancing and laughing. This is just a small glimpse at the amazing chemistry that goes on in your brain. 4. Humans have more than 5 senses. You've probably heard it said often that humans have 5 senses, and indeed, as children, we are taught about the 5 senses of taste, smell, sight, hearing and touch. However, humans have at least 8 senses. All of our senses rely on organs or receptors which detect specific information and turn this into an electrical signal which is sent to the brain to be processed and understood. So let's find out about how 8 of our senses work. Taste and smell are both chemical senses which work when molecules of a substance hit receptors in our nose or mouth. We have a basic taste system which is sensitive to only 5 different types of chemical tastes: salt, sour, bitter, sweet and savoury, known as umami. These are based on 2 different types of receptors on our tongue in our taste buds which send electrical information to the brain. Interestingly, for those that like spicy food, we do not have a taste receptor for chili. Instead, what you feel as heat is signals from the pain detectors in the mouth. We have vastly more smell receptors, around 400 of these in the lining of our nose, which are again sensitive to particular molecules. Taste and smell get processed by the same part of the brain, with taste being so closely linked to smell that you may notice when you have a blocked nose, food does not taste the same as usual. Sight is also a chemical sense, with light being detected by chemical sensors which then turn this information into electrical signals sent to the brain. The eye has 2 kinds of receptors, rods and cones. Cones are better at detecting colour, while rods detect edges and movement. Your eyes are moving all the time without you being aware of it, with your brain constantly processing this information to build up the picture of what is around you. Hearing works by detecting sound vibrations in the air around us. Your ear turns vibrations into electrical signals which are sent to the brain, at which point the signal goes to 2 different parts of the brain. One of these is for identifying what the sound is, such as specific words or doors slamming, and the other is for processing where the sound is coming from. Touch receptors are found within our skin and mucous membranes and consist of several different kinds of sensation. All of the different sensations from these receptors are sent up the spinal cord to be processed by the brain, and the sensations are then mapped onto the body where they are felt. Proprioception is very similar to our sense of touch, however it relies on receptors in our joints and tendons which allow us to know where our body parts are in space. If you close your eyes and reach up to touch your nose, it is proprioception that allows you to know where your nose is. Our sense of balance allows us to move around the world. Our inner ears have canals that contain a fluid with tiny stones attached to small hair-like protrusions. When we start to move, the stones move in the fluid and bend the hairs, sending signals to the brain about how we're moving, allowing us to maintain a sense of balance. There is still a lot to learn about this pathway. Finally, interoception relays information to the brain about many different types of tissue and organs from the body, such as heart rate and breathing. These signals are not processed by a single part of the brain, but instead are input to many different brain regions. 5. Only 2 kinds of neurons control all our movements. These are lower motor neurons, which project to the muscles from the brainstem and spinal cord, and upper motor neurons, which connect to the rest of the brain and to the lower motor neurons. There are 4 general ways in which our brain and nervous system control our movements. The simplest of these are involuntary reflexes, but even these work in different ways. Some, such as your leg swinging when a doctor taps your knee with a hammer, move through the lower motor neurons and spinal cord. Others, such as your pupil shrinking in bright light or the gag reflex, involve the lower motor neurons in the brainstem. Upper motor neurons are located above the spinal column and have a wide range of functions. They are important for controlling our posture, how we orientate ourselves in the world, and how we control our voluntary movements and complex sequences of movement. Upper motor neurons also receive information from the cerebellum about errors in actions and receive instructions to correct these errors. Finally, there's the basal ganglia, small nuclei that form a ring around the brainstem that are important for initiating voluntary actions in the upper motor neurons, but also for preventing involuntary actions that are inappropriate. For example, if you were to lift a hot pan, an involuntary action would trigger for you to drop the pan. However, if it is full of boiling water, the basal ganglia and upper motor neurons can overcome the involuntary action. I explored voluntary and involuntary and the prevention of involuntary movements previously when I explored Constam's phenomenon, otherwise known as the floating arms experiment, so I'll put a link in the description for you to check it out. 6. The brain has bridges between awareness and action. Human brains are incredibly complex. I've already covered in this video how we receive information from 8 of our senses, how our neurons communicate, and how parts of the brain work to control movement. Now I'm going to look at other areas of the brain and their function. There are areas in the brain where you can find what is known as an association cortex, which is where the bridging of awareness and action take place. Compared to other primates, humans have greater computational thinking due to the size of this area. The temporal lobes, which sit on either side of the brain, are where visual information such as faces and auditory information such as speech are processed. In the frontal lobes, the association cortex is responsible for planning responses and preventing inappropriate responses. And in the parietal lobes, the association cortex is important for linking sensation and action, as well as paying attention to the world around us. Moving away from the association cortex, we have the cingulate, which is responsible for focusing on demanding tasks and ignoring distractions, and also for the production of emotional sounds, such as when you stub your toe and cry out in pain. The insula is important for processing pain and a sense of self, as well as controlling delivery of speech. The hippocampus is important for forming memories, and the amygdala is hugely important in understanding emotions, forming emotional memories, and recognizing faces. The hypothalamus controls our body temperature, sleep cycle, heart rate and blood pressure, among other things. Finally, the brainstem has areas that are essential for us to remain conscious, as well as controlling breathing and vomiting. Swelling in the brain can lead to pressure on the brainstem, causing people to pass out or vomit, and this is why people should be closely monitored after a head injury, as these are the warning signs that there could be an issue with the brain. 7. Octopuses have 9 brains. Brains have evolved many times over in lots of different animals. Some parts of the brain are more prominent in some animals due to their requirements for survival, such as alligators having a larger portion of the brain dedicated to smell than humans do. In fact, alligators can smell a dead animal from 4 miles away. Elephants have 3 times as many neurons as humans do. However, almost 98% of these are found in the cerebellum, possibly due to the coordination needed for such large bodies and the ability required to control their trunk. Octopuses are part of a group called cephalopods, which includes squid and cuttlefish, and they are completely different from vertebrate brains, of which there is one and it's enclosed in a skull. Octopuses have around 500 million neurons, the most by far of any invertebrate, and it has 9 brains. There is one central brain which surrounds its mouth, as well as a brain at the base of each tentacle. This means that each tentacle can move independently of the others and can also process touch, taste and possibly even visual information. Octopuses are capable of exploring their worlds in very complex ways through their flexibility and problem-solving skills. It has often been said that if we want to engage with aliens, then we could start by exploring octopus brains and behaviour, and octopuses have also been reported as engaging socially with humans, so perhaps they're as interested in humans as we are in them. Octopuses have also displayed emotions, such as punching fish when the octopus is annoyed. I'll put a link in the description to a video of this happening. 8. Your brain grows to 4 times its size from birth to age 6. As I said at the start of the video, most of our 86 billion neurons are with us from birth, meaning that babies have enormous brains at birth compared to other mammals. This is one of the factors that makes childbirth difficult and dangerous for human females. These big brains of babies grow really fast, and by the time you are 6, your brain will be 4 times bigger than it was when you were born, due to complex changes taking place within the brain as it develops towards an adult brain. By age 6, your brain is 90% the size of an adult brain. As humans grow towards adulthood, the speed and efficiency of the neurons increases as the brain develops towards being that of an adult. During the transition from childhood to adulthood, the parts of the brain that process sensory information develop an adult profile first, while the prefrontal cortex develops towards this point last, as it is not even fully established by 18. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for, among other things, decision making, behaviour and personality. The pattern of brain development suggests that it has not reached the profile of an adult brain until our 20s. At the other end of the spectrum, as humans age, there is a decline in the brain function and indeed its size. This to some extent seems to follow the reverse pattern of the development of an adult brain, with sensory areas experiencing high losses to begin with and the prefrontal cortex being one of the last areas to show the effects of old age. The highest rate of loss within the brain is less than 1% per year, and in much of the brain the loss is much less. 9. Your brain is unique. Although human brains are very similar at a basic level, the precise anatomy of your brain, the information it has stored and some ways that it functions will be unique to you. This is because our brains are affected partly by the genes we have inherited and partly by the experiences our brains have been exposed to. Male brains are larger than female brains, however female brains contain more grey matter, which is the tissue of the brain that contains the cell bodies of the neurons. It is thought that the increased grey matter in female brains is to allow comparable computational power within a smaller brain. It is also currently unknown as to why male brains are larger. The structure of brains is also affected by the intelligence quotient or IQ, however it is not known whether the IQ affects the brain structure or the brain structure affects the IQ. Similarly, personality is affected by the brain, but it is still unclear what the best way is of linking personality with brain structure and function. Reading, writing and speaking more than one language stimulates the brain in different ways, with Chinese speakers, for example, having to engage the parts of their brain relating to music when listening to someone speaking, due to the subtle changes in how a sound is said that give it meaning. For example, in Cantonese, gao could be 9, dog or pieces, depending on exactly how it is said. It has also been shown that the brains of those who read English have to do more work to process what they're reading due to the same letter combinations having different sounds, like OUGH sounding different in cough, though, through, rough and thought. Evidence shows that those who are multilingual, can speak more than one language, are better at doing tasks that require a lot of attention. Those are just some of the many ways that our brain can be affected by biology or experiences. Your exact mix of genes and your own personal experiences affect the formation and connections in your brain, and that is why every brain is unique. 10. Your brain is floating inside your skull. Your brain does not rest against your skull or be held in a fixed spot in your head. Your skull is full of cerebrospinal fluid, which is a clear, colourless liquid that surrounds the brain and spinal column, serving a double purpose of protecting and nourishing them. Although protection is one of the roles of the cerebrospinal fluid, it is still possible for your brain to be damaged in a number of ways. Closed head injuries happen when the head is impacted but the brain is not itself directly penetrated or exposed. These can be very serious because sudden rotation or impact to the head can cause the brain to move, potentially striking the skull, doing damage to the brain tissue and could result in a stroke. The symptoms and long-lasting effects will vary depending on what part or parts of the brain are affected by the injury. Speaking of strokes, there are two different types of stroke, ischemic and hemorrhagic. Ischemic strokes are caused by a blood vessel closing or being blocked, stopping blood flow from getting to the brain. A hemorrhagic stroke is caused by a blood vessel rupturing, resulting in a bleed on the brain. It's important to note that during a stroke, the signs of brain damage start suddenly. However, if the person receives urgent medical treatment and survives the stroke, some improvements in their conditions can occur. There are two final thoughts I want to leave you with. 1. It is important to be able to detect symptoms of major brain injuries as soon as possible. To recognise the signs of a stroke, you need to think of the acronym FAST. Face. Has the face dropped on one side or their mouth or their eye? Can they smile? Arms. Can they lift both arms and keep them held up? This may not be possible due to arm weakness. Speech. Can they speak, and if so, is it slurred or garbled? Time. Dial 999 immediately if you spot any of these symptoms or suspect someone is having a stroke. 2. You only get one brain and one set of 86 billion neurons. Once neurons die, they cannot be replaced. This means we need to be careful about what substances we take, as there are psychoactive substances which will negatively affect your brain cells. Similarly, brain damage can be a major challenge to overcome and adapt to, so we need to make sure we are protecting our heads. This means things like wearing helmets when out on bikes and scooters. The best thing you can do for your brain is to give it as many opportunities and experiences for growth and development as possible. Thank you for watching this Things You Should Know video. The majority of the information for this video came from 10 Things You Should Know About the Brain by Professor Sophie Scott. I was only able to touch on a tiny fraction of the huge amount of information in this book. You can subscribe to the channel by pushing the button here, and I've added a link here to my other Things You Should Know videos and underneath to my STEM activity videos and my STEM career interviews. This has been STEM with Mr. N, exploring 10 Things You Should Know About the Brain.